Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Restricted Handling Podcast. Today, you've got Glenn and myself for a little bit, and then we'll be joined by a gentleman named Zhan, who's in the Third Corps in Ukraine fighting. He's a deputy commander in the air defense unit, so we'll hear a little bit about their counter UAV capabilities. We talked a lot about UAVs, but this is somebody who's really focused on the air defense aspect, which is so important, not just for what we're seeing in Ukraine, but obviously what much of the Middle East is dealing with in counter missile, counter UAV capabilities from an air defense standpoint. But thought we talk a little bit about what Glenn has been up to recently, get his input on Russia, Iran, and everything that's happening. Glenn, you had a trip not too long ago over to Eastern Europe and Ukraine. Maybe we could start with what you were doing there and feelings on the ground.
Good morning, Ryan. How are you? Happy Sunday.
Good.
Happy Sunday to you.
Likewise.
Yeah, we were just a couple of weeks ago, we were in Ukraine. We did quite a bit of traveling. I was there with former Director General David Petreus, former commander of CENTCOM, and a couple of other great friends. So a small group. As I said, we traveled quite a bit to different regions for meetings with various people, and then ended up in Kyiv for the last 2 days of our visit, meeting with high-level officials there. Very interesting time to be there. And then we spoke at a conference organized pretty much because General Petreus was there. And so it was a very, very good visit. I mean, very intense, a lot of movement, exhausting, but great. And anyone that travels with General Petreus knows he likes to go. And I was able, I have to say this to the audience, the former director of the CIA confirmed for me that my intel was correct about Ukraine. Cleanest gas stations in the world and the best hot dogs.
At the gas stations?
At the gas stations.
Do they just have them on a roller like 7-Eleven?
No, it's like they put them like in Denmark. You ever see like the Danish hot dogs? They put it inside the bun,
Uh, okay.
right? Really good. And I told the general before we went, I said, you're going to not believe like how clean the gas stations are. So at one of the gas stations between a couple of cities in the east we were traveling between, we stopped to fill up and we went inside and he said, hey, come here, translate for me, okay? And I translated for the woman behind the counter and he said, listen, I am General David Petraeus, former director of the CIA and former commander of, CENTCOM. And I just want to let you know, this is the cleanest gas station I've ever seen. Like, kudos to you. So the woman looks at him and she says, that's great, but you should have been here yesterday. And he said, why is that? And she says, because I had an inspection team here yesterday. It would have been nice to have you validate like our great Ukrainian story. So anyway,
Nice of him to say that.
yeah.
Glenn, how did the feelings with your interlocutors and just the people on the ground, how has it changed since you were over there, what, 3 months ago
We were
prior to
there
this?
beginning mid-February, right? And then just back again a couple of weeks ago. The big change was the war in the Gulf, the war in Iran. So a lot of attention, a lot of concern that war is drawing off attention from Ukraine, that it's slowing down the peace negotiations. Although people that we met with in the Ukrainian government that are directly involved in that process said, no, they're still engaging with the U.S. side. It's the Russians that are not engaging now directly. The Russians were supposed to travel to the U.S. for meetings and they didn't. The Ukrainians did. So there's concern that there's been a kind of draw off of air defense resources, Patriot munitions to defend U.S. forces and allies in the Gulf from the Iranians. And then a lot of discussion of how the Ukrainians are actually helping the Gulf countries and the U.S. And by the way, I say this all the time, like Americans should not forget that when we went into this war, which I've said this before on the program and publicly, I believe is a justified war against the Islamic regime, which has declared war on the United States years ago and shed a lot of American blood over the years and allied blood. And I made this point to the Ukrainians, like the Russians have shown that they want to wipe Ukraine off the map. The Islamic regime has talked openly about destroying the state of Israel, which is unacceptable in my opinion. But anyway, the Ukrainians were probably the first European country to come out in support of President Trump's decision to initiate Epic Fury. And we shouldn't forget that. And then President Zelensky himself went to the Gulf to meet with our partners. Some of my friends on the Ukrainian side were actually in the Gulf training, working with the militaries there to figure out how to better engage or defeat the drone threat. And we could talk a little bit about that with Zhan, I think, during the actual,
Yeah.
when we do that podcast, that part of the podcast. But a lot of focus on Iran, And of course, the Ukrainians, if you remember back December of last year, there was talk that the front was going to collapse. People in the U.S. were saying the Ukrainians need to make a deal immediately before it was too late. Actually, the Ukrainians are taking back territory. Not to exaggerate, they're not, taking hundreds of kilometers of territory, but they do have the Russians on the back foot in multiple areas along the front. They are continuing to fight a very, very impressive war, and it's the war of drones now.
Yeah.
What we saw, I think one Ukrainian military official told us of all the troops mobilized, only about, and I want to get this wrong, but 40 to 50,000 are actually on the front itself. Most are fighting the tech war. And the innovation piece remains. We've talked about this on multiple podcasts. It's stunning what they're doing, how they're doing it. There are a lot of lessons learned, and the Ukrainians have made it clear to us that they're ready to share those lessons with the U.S. military, with other NATO countries. I should also mention, too, there's concern that, the relationship between Washington and Brussels is very tense. And that's, of course, a big concern for the Ukrainians.
Well, of course, we did that interview recently on Hungary. Orban lost that election. We had done the interview just before the election. He lost. This idea that the EU will now be able to release this $90 billion, 90 billion euro package for Ukraine is a big opportunity. But just back on what you mentioned, Russia and not going to the US for negotiations, Glenn. Well, what's the rationale there? Is it because Russia feels like it's in a stronger position given some of the oil revenue coming in with Iran? Is it something else? Why would they not go to the negotiating table?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I think maybe because they didn't want to come to the States, or I think they're just trying to disrupt and drag out these negotiations. I wouldn't exaggerate the benefit of, the sanctions. I don't even call it relief, but there's been some exemptions to Russian oil already at sea, that the administration lifted sanctions on those tankers. My understanding is under pressure from countries that were feeling the pinch from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And now, unfortunately, so they did it for a month. Secretary Bessent came out a week ago and said, okay, we're not going to renew that exemption. And yet 2 days later, the Treasury Department OFAC did renew the exemption, which is, again, like bad sign or bad symbol in my opinion, but I wouldn't exaggerate how this is really helping the Russian budget. The Russian government, the Russian budget continues to struggle. The Russian economy continues to struggle, and there's all kinds of stuff happening in Moscow now and in Russia. While we were in Kyiv, the Russian government was enacting a series of internet blackouts in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and that caused a lot of angst among Russians, from what I know. There's been a lot of rumor, people being removed from jobs. There's a lot of rumors that, Putin is under increasing pressure. And the Ukrainians were very successful in striking some of the main oil terminals, including in the north, in the vicinity of St. Petersburg, which makes it harder for the Russians to actually export whatever oil resources they can. So, again, I think what we heard from experts is that there's probably some benefit for this temporary waivers, but not much, and it's very limited.
About some of the news about Belarus, there's news that Trump may have extended an invite to Lukashenko to come out and reestablish ties. What's the likelihood of that happening, Glenn? Just how close Belarus is to Putin today? Is there a real opportunity here?
I think there's an opportunity. How real it is hard to say. I mean, I think that we've seen this before, where Lukashenko may be looking for a better relationship. He's got his own objectives. The Russians may let him go to a certain point, but I think he's still very dependent on Moscow, and he's surrounded by people that are on Moscow's payroll, that are loyal to Moscow before they are to Minsk. So, I'm not against it personally, but we should also be very careful. This is my own assessment. And I should stress, like we're talking as a private citizen, I have no connection with the U.S. government anymore. So anyone out there, this is not an official.
Opinions are our own. Yeah.
Opinions are our own. And by the way, my wife says my opinions are not good, but no, what I would say is we need to be very careful, because there's been discussion of lifting some sanctions on Belarus to encourage the Belarusians to move closer to the U.S. But we just should make sure that the Belarusians aren't using that as a pass-through to rearm the Russians or provide the Russians with technology or equipment that the Russians need, which, is something you got to be very careful about.
Is it likely that Lukashenko would have to get blessing from Putin before he could go to such a meeting?
I would think that he would clear it with Putin in advance.
Yeah.
We shouldn't forget that we're seeing in other parts of the former Soviet Union, in what was Russia's sphere of influence, they're losing control. Azerbaijan, Armenia, we did the, podcast on Armenia. We did one with Matt about, Azerbaijan. They're losing their lock. The Central Asian countries are looking for alternatives. And it's possible that Lukashenko and people around him are saying this is like a losing bet to count only on the Kremlin, when the Kremlin has miscalculated so badly multiple times in recent years, and it's hurting Russia and it's hurting us. So maybe we need to ease up. And of course, I think people in the administration would argue that because of what they did, a number of political prisoners were released from Belarusian prisons, which, human rights activists, political opposition figures. So, which I think every administration has been focused on doing, with when it was the Soviet Union and then later, Russia, Belarus, any country that's holding political prisoners.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, just before Zhan joins us, it's Sunday, April 19th. There's a lot going on in Iran, obviously. The latest was the Strait is open. Then I think IRGC stated it was closed. You had two vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz that indicated that they had been shot at or fired at in some way. I think they may have been Indian flag vessels. Some talk, I guess President Trump was suggesting that Iran had agreed to give up its enriched uranium, but the Iranian regime has not admitted to that. It looks like Zhan is joining us now. Welcome.
Sure. How are you?
Good enough. I'm in Kyiv now. Just came back from a Zoom for, I think, 5 or 6 days. We have some conferences on this week, and then came back to it.
And then just for our listeners, and then Glenn, I'll kick it over to you to start us here. But Zhan, Deputy Chief of Air Defense in Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps. You were in the Merchant Navy prior to that, joined the fight at the start of the full-scale invasion. You've been on the ground in some of the most consequential battles, including Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Can't even imagine what that was like. You're helping in one of the most important evolutions in warfare we've seen in our generation, which is building this modern adaptive air defense network in real time on the battlefield. You're taking down up to 1,000 UAVs a month, I understand, and you're really at the center of integrating this air defense capability in this new modern battlefield. So thank you so much for spending some time with Glenn and I. Glenn, why don't you kick us off here?
It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. And thank you for inviting, because it was, I already not forgot, but saying, okay, you have a lot of things to do. And after that, Anna called me and said, can you join the podcast? I said, of course, finally.
Listen, when I came back from Kyiv in February, I told Ryan, I said, we gotta interview Zhan, because he was a mariner. He's got a great story. And like so many other Ukrainians that I've met, gave up one career to go back and defend the country. And he's the son of another, sea captain. And by the way, I grew up on the oceans. Your career is near and dear to me. I grew up in a village it was a fishing village and a whaling village back in the 1800s.
Okay.
In New York. So I was very impressed with you when I met you.
Actually, I just 2 weeks ago we came back from United States. I was in Washington D.C. for a week and for 5 days in New York City, and it was pretty awesome.
Zhan, I wanted to introduce you to Ryan. He's our main host. He's the brains behind the outfit. I'm just the good looks. God help us.
Hey, Zhan, seriously, thank you for taking the time to do this. I mean, you're in the middle of a war and you got people under your command. So thank you for spending some time with us. I am not a former mariner. I am actually a former pilot. I flew Apache helicopters in the past. So air defense scared the hell out of me. So I'm super interested to hear about how you're evolving tactics and what the world is learning from what you all are doing from an air defense capacity. So we're really excited to have you here. But Zhan, while we have you, can you just tell us what was it like in DC and New York? Had you been to the US before? Like, what was the experience like?
Yes, I have been to US before in Miami, few times. It was 2 times in New Orleans and 1 time in Houston, but it all was about the seaman's life. So I worked on the container vessel, and uh, for example, tankers or grain vessels can stay in the port alongside for a week sometimes to reload, to recharge everything. But for container ship, it's just 15, 16 hours. It's every time a rush. But I was a deck cadet at that time. And once we are alongside, there are no responsibilities. And I was totally free to go out and I use it. So we were in Miami for 16 times. And 15 of that 16, I just ran to the city. So it was only few hours, and I was, $400 salary per month. So nothing in my pocket. I was just walking around the city and looking on United States because you can close the eyes of almost anybody in the world from any country and you can place them in different countries and I'm not sure that they will recognize where they are. But if you put anybody to United States, I'm totally sure that you can recognize that you are just in this country because of movies, TV series, everything. And that's what I was trying to feel. And I did it pretty good. And now in Washington, D.C. and New York, it was totally other level because in Washington, we were in Pentagon 2 times. We come to the office of the Speaker of the Congress, Mr. Johnson. So we came there just inside and speak with him for half an hour. Before I was running on the streets just to smoke some cigarettes somewhere. Now I'm in the Congress. It's totally different experience. And yes, it was pretty interesting. And I hope that the best thing that we can do is the storytelling for the people of America, and that's what we are trying to do. Because you can read anything, you can even watch a movie, but if you can look in the eyes, it's make a difference. I hope that's our mission was passed. So that was like a business trip, and that's it.
Amazing.
Zhan, again, it's great to see you again. So this week has been Ukraine week here in Washington. Your prime minister was here, the head of the central bank. There's been a number of meetings. I was on Capitol Hill Friday with delegations. Today, I'm going to speak at the American Coalition for Ukraine. They're having a big event this weekend, so we're going to do some storytelling as well, as you mentioned, try and educate people. But I'm going to jump in with something which you are uniquely qualified to discuss. And it's not exactly Ukraine related, although it's very Ukraine related. And that is what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. You were a ship captain. You were on a freighter. And now we have a situation, and you're now an air defense expert in the country that is leading the world. I mean, your experts are in the Gulf countries advising our Gulf partners on how to do air defense against drones, against complex threats that are coming from Iran. How do you see, how would you approach defense against air threats and, of course, against mines that are present in the Strait of Hormuz right now from the Iranians? Can you talk about that? Like on board a ship, could you put some of the drone interceptors that you've mastered in Ukraine? You think that would work from ship, or are we missing something here in terms of the flow of wind? And
so 4 years ago, I'm the merchant guy on a vessel, and I'm third officer on board of the ship, and I'm passing the Strait of Hormuz. I would be just afraid as heck, and that's all. So I have nothing to do with anything. So rockets and missiles flying over me, drones flying over me, mines under the water, and I'm just piloting the vessels. There is nothing to do from the side of a merchant fleet. I don't feel that it's possible to do something. If now I'll become the seaman, I would take at least a few hundred of just normal FPV drones with me, because sometimes these mines can be on the surface of the water, as I understand, and I think I understand it right. And I can just send the drone inside of that mine, destroy it, and then pass. So maybe like this. Hey, of course, it's fantastic, but still, it's possible because some, security organizations, they are working on the vessels when they are passing the Somali horn, etc., etc. So it's possible. Regarding the protection from the drones, I am not sure that they are attacking the vessels by drones. They can, but I think that they use the rockets and it's missiles. It's complicated. But if they want to do this by drones, it's more or less possible to launch any interceptor drone from board of the vessel. Is just enough. Today was the first time this night confirmed interception of Shahed that was made from the drone with interceptor that was launched from the unmanned boat by Nemesis, Ukrainian guys. Yes, they sent the unmanned boat deep into Black Sea, and they launched the drone from there. And it's first time, completed. It worked.
The Nemesis guys, right? Nemesis.
Yes,
God
yes, yes,
bless.
yes.
Yeah.
Wait, can you describe that one again, John? So what happened for the first time? It
What
was an
happened?
unmanned boat in the Black Sea.
Yes, yes, these guys, yes. So they take the unmanned boat, put there a box with interceptor drone, and send it to the not the middle, but the Black Sea, a few miles or 10 or 50 miles, doesn't matter. It's connected through internet, Starlink, and then the pilot who were sitting in Odessa city or I don't know somewhere around were able to control that drone from his home or office or doesn't matter. And they just open the box, interceptor came out of that box, and after that it's usual interception.
Wow. So, Zhan, you probably know, we were just with your commander and the leadership staff. We had great meetings. The head of our delegation, General Petreus, was very, very impressed. And I always tell people, because we've interviewed a number of your colleagues, we've met with the commander multiple times. Maybe the most effective fighting force in Ukraine today, the Third Corps. Right. And maybe the most innovative and modern leadership style that I think I've seen. Even, we have a lot to learn from the Third Corps here in the U.S., I think, in the way you're doing things. I asked General Bieletsky last September, I said, what's your advice for Americans? And he said, you need to figure out how to integrate civilians into the military very quickly. How long do you think it would take to train somebody without any background in flying drones to do the work that your units are doing now? How long did it take you guys, and what are the things that we need to think about in the US and in NATO to prepare for the type of war you're having to fight?
So in general, if we are speaking solely and totally about interception and drones that will intercept other drones, that, for example, I need to protect the Kyiv. I need 100 crews and it's 300 people with 3 people in each of them. And I'm totally sure that I will not send that guys to the battlefield. I want them only one mission, just to fly and destroy and intercept. If you mean that, I cannot tell you for sure just because I like to speak about something that I already, was in, but just nowadays, just today and yesterday and tomorrow, we are working on the project. It's like private air defense. It's named. It's government, helped us with this. So in general, what they're trying to do, that's what I was speaking about. If you need to protect, I don't know, I am the Amazon. I have a lot of stockpile, how do you call it? The place where you collect all your belongings. So stocks, doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And I want to protect them from the drone. And I have a lot of money. So I can, hire some guys who can do this, and they will do this, not the only military on the front line or military over the city, but I can protect my own facility with my own trained people. And that's what we are trying to do now. As you totally understand, we have a lot of veterans, not only from Third Army Corps, but a lot of veterans. And not all of them can return to the battlefield, but mostly all of them understand how it's working. And what we are doing now, we are building this private air defense from two positions. First of all, we take our veterans, we send them not back to the battlefield, but closer to the battlefield where we are fighting Shaheds, for example, and we are training them. I hope, and I'm pretty sure that if you go just from zero, you never touch the controller of the drone, as I were 2.5 years ago. For me, it was enough just to launch and fly around, not to complete the mission, but just to launch and fly around, more or less effective. It was 5 days, and after that 2 days of trainings, not training, exams, and after that I were able to do this, and I did it. But my role was the second pilot. I was not the piloting. I was, looking on the map, looking on the image of the drone, and then comparing them. And okay, go left, go right. But interceptors are more complicated, and I think and I hope that we will be inside of this project, and in few months I can answer you directly with the days. But now, if we are speaking about counter-shahed interceptions, and that's all, not basic trainings, not firing the gun, etc. I think that from 0 to level when you can go to position and be more or less sure in yourself that you can hit it, up to 2 months, not more than 2 months, I say.
What about people who are 55 years old, Zhan, or older? Does it take them longer to learn how to do this?
Yes,
7 years.
definitely. It's harder and harder with any year. For example, I think that our generation, when I will be 55 years old, it will be much easier to me to learn that thing. But for 55 years old now, yeah, we need at least plus 1 month.
Well, it took me 18 months to learn how to fly a helicopter, so you're way ahead of that. Sean, one of the things I'm noticing as you describe some of this activity is like, well, if you're talking about shaheeds or interception, and I think there's a lot of detail that goes into the work that you do. How do you think about, when you look at the battle space, how do you think about countering a drone or different types of drones versus rockets or missiles or some other offensive capability? How do you build in the layers? How do you think about it as a commander?
Yeah, that's the answer, that it should be layered. So that what it's not, we did not invent it. It is in every military book, I think, but we made it possible on the ground. So we realize that it should work, and we make it, in real life. So in general, just to cut not the half, but the rockets. We are land forces, and we are on the first in miles. I think it's 30 to 40 miles, because United States people were listening to me. I think kilometers don't say nothing to them. I should use miles. So just 100 miles in length, 30 to 40 miles in depth. That's my zone of responsibility from the battlefield. And on such distances, it's pretty impossible to use that type of intercept of Patriots, NASAMS, IRIS-T. All these things is not on, we are not equipped with it. We are land forces. We are the first layer, and we don't use them. So about fighting the missiles, yes, if it's cruise missile, you can destroy it even with manpad like Stinger or RBS-70. But it's not the common thing that they are flying through the battlefield. Mostly they are flying from the sea or from the Belarus, where there are no land forces. So drones, that's what I can speak a lot about. Here we are speaking on something like low tactical to operational and strategical level. And if we're speaking about strategical, these are the people from air defense, air forces, which have air defense inside of it. So I'm working in tactical to operational level. And it's in general, it can be divided to 3 echelons. The first one, just the main one for us, because infantry is the guts of the war, and we are working for infantry. Me as an officer, nobody without them. They are, my kings, and I should make them live as long as possible. Otherwise, I will be there. That's just a simple thing. So the first echelon is fighting against small, like basketball drones, like Mavic, small 10-inch FPV, etc. It's hundreds of them. It's thousands of them per month. I don't know. Last month, I think I don't want to check in phone, but 800 of them were destroyed in the zone of responsibility. Only of FPV drones. I think more or less the same of Mavic drones. So in general, that number that you told in the beginning, that is 1,000 of UAV. Now this month, March, it was 2.4 thousand per month, and now I think that we are heading to. My chief told me we should do at least 3,000 interceptions per month. So it's growing. And the first layer is to fight with this 10-inch drone. We are working to intercept them with the same type of drone, the same 10-inch. So it's bullet to bullet thing. Just find them in the air and destroy. There are no sensors. You just fly, looking around, you see the drone, you destroy it. And guys with the guns. I think I will share it, or it doesn't matter. So I have a video where a guy just walking with a gun through the forest, and it's 10 seconds. So he heard something and he said, no way, it's impossible. And he had a GoPro on his head. And then you can see the drone is coming and he shoot it from the first bullet. It was yesterday. And just if one bullet, the drone go down, explode. And this guy just said, okay, it's good now. So these guys are protecting the tactical level. And this is the level where we can teach everybody, not the strategical one. We don't want to tell United States or NATO how to work with, but we know how to use one rocket per one missile, not four, but doesn't matter.
Zhan, real quick, Zhan, the guy who you said had the GoPro, was he an air defense service member?
These
And
are
he's
the
out
guys,
there to do exactly that.
yes, they are walking around the logistics, the main roads of us, and just patrolling them. They know that sometimes it can be, a waiter drone that just sitting on the ground with optic fiber and looking on the road. And once your car is going from here, it just go up and destroy you. So these are the guys, 2-3 people, the fire squad. They're walking around these roads and just looking on the ground in the air and fighting them with the guns. Not a shotgun, but machine gun to make it more precise. Yes. And this is the first layer, the lower tactical one. And we change the positions in the battalions to add guys from air defense. So there are air defense platoon, and we make it bigger. It was 11 people before, after that 13 when I was there, and now it's 19, and we are going to 30 because air defense is more and more, complex and effective. And these are the guys from battalions of the linear brigades. The second layer is like tactical to operational. This is the air defense divisions within the brigades. And I have 5 brigades within the corps, and each of them have an air defense division inside. So it's about 400 people, maybe less, maybe more, but more or less. And they are fighting against reconnaissance drone like Orlan, Zala, Supercam, Knyaz Vishelev, a lot of them. Merlin, they're covering the logistics, they're covering the medevac, the stocks against everything. They are covering the protecting the second layer. It's our second layer. Also, they are fighting against Molnia drones, which are, for example, 1,500 were destroyed last month, and 1,500 of them are flying in zone of the core every week. So it's 6,000 of them per month. Just we have 7 bridges within the zone of responsibility of the core, and we know that enemy have uh, they should achieve it. They should send one Molnia drone to each of these 7 bridges every 15 minutes. So it's 28 per hour, and it's almost 700 of them per day. They are trying to achieve it because without bridge, we cannot pass the river. Logistics cracked, we are cracked. So yes, this is the second layer. Here are we also already have UGV with unmanned turret on it, with a camera, with acoustic sensor, for example. It's not now here, now it's a camera. And this turret can eat information from the radar that are just somewhere there. And it knows that, okay, somewhere on the north, something is flying. After that, it automatically goes there. And with this optic channel, it's night vision, thermal camera, it can see the drone, and operator should just press the button to fire. It confirmed, okay, I can see now, I am aiming now, okay, it should be precise, shoot. And we already use it. And this is the second layer. You cannot send a car with a gun on it because car should be led by somebody, and it's too important. Even within 15 miles now, this is a kill zone. You cannot send the guys there. If you want to evacuate somebody, send the UGV. If you want to provide guys with something, send the heavy quadrocopter drone that will launch the drones for them. That's how logistics now works. And it's very short, but I try to be as short as possible. And third layer is the operational level. So I have these 5 brigades, and on the 6th time, the 6 organisms that I have, is the air defense regiment within the Corps. The Third Army Corps, under command of Andriy Beletsky, is the first and the only corps that finish the task from our commander, from Syrsky and from Volodymyr Zelensky, to collect the people for air defense division within 1 year. And once we collect, we fulfill the people, they said, okay, and we ask them, just give us more space for people, not 500, give us more. And we are the first and the only who have the regiment within the land forces of Ukraine. And this regiment is 1,500 people. And now we are growing. And this is my, main guys, because I can use them on the operational level, deeper within my zone of responsibility. But once any of these brigades have a problem, I can take these guys and send them in line of any of it. And they are fighting mostly against Shaheds, but also they have counter Mavic, they have counter Molnia, counter reconnaissance drone. So we use them to help these guys and still to work on the depths of the core level. So in general, more or less, and of course we cannot forget that this arm cannot work without one command and control. We also have separate command and control posts within the core level, and they are coordinating all of this together. And sometimes there are some people coming into our zone of responsibility to work, so there are two hands and they're making like this, and only command and control post can control it. And we have separate guys who just eating the raw data from the radars and making it proceeded data. They on the chats, on the closed meetings like this, but protected with all the crews and teams that are working on the front line, and all of this working 24/7 just simultaneously.
Yes,
Amazing.
pretty amazing.
And Glenn, I'll kick it to you here in a second, but just for people who are listening and can't see you, Zhan, like you're indicating on your hand, like, all right, I've got these 5 divisions within the brigades. And then you pointed like to your watch, which is kind of the regimental asset that sits there. And you're talking at the tactical, operational, strategic level, which is very military doctrine. And it's funny because you're mentioning like you were a merchant naval seaman less than 5 years ago, and this is crazy. Like what you're talking about sounds like what we would hear in a war college for somebody who's been doing this 15, 20, 25 years. It is amazing the type of innovation you all have had.
Listen, Ryan, I'm with you. It's amazing. The level of integration is amazing. A couple of things that you mentioned, Zhan, which I think like the audience should understand. Logistics have become key part of which was always the case, but the way that logistics are being handled now, using UGVs, using UAVs, is just, it's stunning. The medical aspect, my understanding is that the ratio of killed to wounded on the battlefields has shifted from 3 wounded to 1 killed to 3 killed and 1 wounded, because it's very difficult to get people out of off the battlefield once they're wounded, and maybe even a less significant wound could become more serious because it's very hard to get somebody in medical expertise in to retrieve a wounded soldier. And so then UGVs are being used for evacuate, medevac. It's just, it's amazing to see. And my understanding is you guys, again, are very, very good at what you're doing. Maybe the best in the world right now, Zhan.
Yeah.
I mean, and if I was wearing a hat, I'd take it off and say, hats off to you. And this is the story of Ukraine that I always tell people. Somebody who 2 years ago was doing none of this has had to learn very quickly. And, to basically, and you gave up a good career in an interesting, a lot of people dream about going to sea and, seeing the world, and you gave that all up to come home and defend your country. So just really amazing. One question on the medical piece. How much time now are you training your troops in like basic field medicine, like first aid? Have you had to increase the deployment of medical experts to the front lines? And I know that there's not even a front line anymore, but to your fighting positions. Or is that something that's possible? Because again, if somebody is wounded in one of these fighting positions, it could take a long time to get them out.
Yes, that's I'm not a specialist in this. I spend a lot of time with Victoria Tori, and you also, Glenn, you should know her. Yes, so she is a specialist in this. And what I heard from her, I will retranslate it. So if before the drone come to the battlefield, we were able to speak about golden hour as per medicine book. So it was possible. Now with golden months in general sometimes, so what she told me, that when I came to resume, I'm not going directly to position already, I'm just in the headquarters, etc. But she, all the time she went to resume, she go to medevac, and she collected wounded still, so she's still very deep inside of this. What she told me is that last time when she came to resume, it was just before, at the beginning of the March, before we go to America, to the United States. She told me that the last times she were just, one thing that she were able to do is just sitting and listening by radio, like somebody dying on position, and they were unable to do anything. Just, it's impossible. They cannot reach that people. And sometimes they spend months on the positions. And sometimes what I know, that if you have a small injury, like some shrapnel or something go inside of your leg or something, but you can still proceed with your work, you will not be evacuated, not because nobody can, but because you don't want to do this. Because once you go out under the ground, you can be not damaged, but destroyed. And that's why sometimes people prefer not to go out. And other thing is that if you are in a very bad position through the medical things, it's possible to send the blood by UGV or by drone to drop it on a position, and you should be able, at least your guys should be able to do this with you, to proceed with exchange of blood. And in general, how long do we prepare the guys? So just, it's non-stop thing. Once you go out of position, you rest for 1, 2, 3 days. It depends how long you were there, and you go through the every preparation. You go through medical tests like March, etc. You go through polygon to shoot something. So it's all the time work, because you can forget what to do and how to do, and it's every time changing. But yes, the problem is that it's not impossible, but more than hard to reach somebody out of the battlefield.
And so our viewers know. I mean, your commander showed us some materials on the fighting positions. These are three-story deep fighting positions that people are living in for weeks on end, maybe months on end, right? I mean, so getting in and out is very difficult. And those living conditions, they're living underground and trying to operate, they have to be resupplied constantly. And so, like, for Americans, when we first saw some of the videos of how who all have some experience this stuff, we were all just stunned. And of course, the fortitude of the soldiers is pretty impressive. I don't want to repeat stories, but one of your commanders from another unit told me a story. He had a guy who was stuck in a fighting position for weeks on end. And he kept telling the guy, I'm trying to get you out, but I can't get you a replacement in because of the drone activity. And finally, he called the guy on a Friday. He said, listen, I'm trying, maybe next week. And the guy said, sir, I don't care. Just send me a hot dog, Red Bull, and Marlboro Reds. And they flew in. The hot dog was cold by the time it got there, but he had his hot dog. And the guy said, I'll keep fighting as long as I can. Just keep supplying me with Red Bull, hot dogs, and Marlboro. So, by the way, we don't encourage smoking on this program, Ryan, right?
Yeah, definitely not. Zhan, you mentioned the golden hour for people who are listening. Like, that was a huge deal when we were fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. That was the idea that if someone's injured on the battlefield, if you can get them to a certain level of care facility within 60 minutes, the likelihood of them living or keeping a limb was significantly increased. For you to say it's now months, this is crazy that that's the battlefield today, and that's the battlefield of the future. Honestly, I mean, this is where we're going. So interesting. Zhan, if I can, you had to see Bakhmut, Avdiivka firsthand. Very concentrated fighting in the cities. You describe now the battlefield that you're at today is this long, like 100-mile by 30 to 40-mile rectangle almost. What was it like in Bakhmut and Avdiivka from an air defense standpoint? What did you have to learn there to where you are today?
So in Bakhmut, it was a beginning. We just became so when I came to the battlefield first time in 2022, I came through that first training. Just it was non-military. I never were connected to military at all. Non-training, nothing. So I have 40 days to prepare, and after that I came to my team, to my battalion, and a few days after we go to our first infantry mission. So I was in infantry not for a long time, for a few months. It was few missions, not dangerous compared to what's happening now, because there were no drones. And you know, and then we go to polygon, trained for a few months, and became brigade. And then we go to Bakhmut. And there it started to become a little bit crazy. There were almost no drones, like FPV drones. There were some reconnaissance but almost nothing on the low tactical level. And at that days, I was able to just sit on the, we were able not to dig under the ground. So my air defense work was only from the sunrise to sunset, because we didn't have night vision, how to call it, night vision optics.
Yeah, night vision
So
goggles. Yeah.
I woke up, go to position by car. It was possible at that time. Just ride to the position, hide it, sit on the top of the hill, smoking cigarettes or not smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee or water, and just looking on that direction where anybody can fly. And I was waiting for them, and that was possible. And at that time, I'm not, the bravest and the boldest guy in the world, but it was dangerous. I were afraid. But first time when I really was in shock, it's when enemy launched the anti-tank missile in our blindage directly. I was sitting on the hill, looking on the, waiting for the helicopter to come, and I heard something, and I look in that direction, and I saw this rocket just going toward me. And why I was afraid? Because once I, destroyed our blindage, three of us were there, all alive, go to another blindage, sit down, and at that moment I realized that when they're shooting artillery or mine or something, they're shooting somewhere in your position, somewhere 10 meter less or more, right, left, up, down, doesn't matter. But at that moment, I realized that this anti-tank missile it were controlled by operator. So he were able to see what this rocket can see. And he was just trying to hit not somewhere, but directly into us. And that it's very dangerous. And now every FPV drone is like this. So before it
Yes.
was a few situations when enemy were trying to hit you. It's only, close contact when you eyes to eyes with enemy, or when he firing with something like anti-tank missiles. But now every drone is like this. So when you are sitting on the ground, enemy can hit you directly, not close to you, but just in your head, because he can see you under the last minute. And that's the main difference between Bakhmut and what's going on now. And at the middle of this timeline, it's Avdiivka. So in the Bakhmut, as I said, we have only Manpat, two of Manpat, Stinger and Igla. We were waiting only for helicopters because we were unable to hit reconnaissance drone, and the helicopters was so far away that we cannot reach them with Manpad. We were unable just to reach them. They were flying 10 kilometers, 6 miles away, and I able to shoot 3 miles away. I cannot do nothing. After that, Avdiivka. At that moment, FPV drones already were on the battlefield for half a year. It was not a lot of them, but they just grow in a number. We were able to buy a first time EW. We just learned what is EW because we didn't know about this. I buy a spectrum analyzer that can show me. So I just have an antenna. I like triangle on it, and I just can learn from the frequencies. Is there anything flying there? So we were just training, and during Avdiivka, night time FPV start to exist. They come to the battlefield. Before it was not, and I remember that days when we are changing on our position during the night as Russians, and at night it was safe. And after that, we heard that okay, one car was destroyed during the night, and we said okay, And after the 2, 3, 5, day by day, and we start reading the news, reading Russian, close shots, and they're speaking, okay, now we can fight FPV at night. And we were just, okay, we should do the same, but logistics totally, we were unable to exchange anybody. In Avdiivka, still, I had only manpat in my bag, nothing else. At that time already, our commander told us, guys, I think you should do something at least with a big reconnaissance drone, because they can see us just 24/7. Even it were not a lot of FPV, but still they had a lot of artillery, tanks, blah, blah, blah. Do something with reconnaissance drone. And at that moment, I already have an experience in FPV, and we were preparing for this. And I said, may we please use FPV to go in the air? And everybody, not everybody, but some of guys told me, and what you will do in there, how you will find the target. And I said, okay, it's impossible, but still we will train to fly. Maybe somehow we will receive a possibility to understand where is the enemy. After Avdiivka was the era of these glide bombs, I think you call them like this. They are still on the battlefield. We still cannot do nothing with them. We know how to, but for this we need best and better jets like EFSO, and we need to have another air-to-air surface missile. It's still on the ground, but at that moment they appear on the battlefield, and that was crazy. I came inside of Avdiivka almost at the end of it, so because the main mission of 3rd Assault Brigade at that moment was to deblock Avdiivka and to give other units a possibility to go out of the city. So we were totally understand that we will lose the city, but we pushed to take time, to give time to others. And I go just into the city when it was half captured by Russians, and in the middle of the city there were a hospital. It's only one building with 5 floors, and I go there, I go to my, on the battlefield commander post, and I said, I want to go there because it's the only place from which I can launch the missile from Manpat, and maybe I will shoot the helicopter or plane. And so when I woke up, this building were Ukrainian, and it was more or less not safe, but not damaged. And after 6 hours, when I go to Avdiivka, go by legs, come inside, I go to this commander post. And through these 6 hours, first, we totally destroyed that building. And second, it was captured by Russians. And they said me, okay, you can go there, but it's one-way ticket. And I said, okay, goodbye. And I leave the city. And for me, and we go out of the city, and it's, the hills. And there were waiting for helicopters. We launch, I believe, 2 or 3 times Igla in the direction of the helicopters. We cannot reach them; they are too far. But still, they saw that somebody trying to shoot them, and they were afraid to do this again, and they were go deeper.
Okay.
So this is the second time when still FPV drones were not so effective. But then now with FPV drones, the air defense is just crazy. So it's like idiom in Soviet, Russian, Ukrainian armies that air defense guy are speaking, we are not flying and we are not allowing anybody to fly. It's like before, but now we are flying in interceptors 24/7, and we are on the totally other war. So doctrines are not working. We invented these interceptors. It were non-exist. We were the first land forces brigade in 2024 in June. We already destroyed our first Zala, few of them, and Orlan after that with the drones.
Awesome.
And that's how it is.
Zhan, so just so the audience understands, despite all the great innovation in the counter drone space, the challenge that Ukraine faces today is with resupply of air defense munitions to counter the Russian Kinzhals, the cruise missiles, and then you mentioned the Kyiv, the glide bombs, which, my understanding is you have F-16s, but they don't have the surface air-to-air missiles that they need to defeat the Russian aircraft that are launching those
Exactly.
those glide bombs right along the front. And of course, the audience should understand that the Russians are using those systems against civilian targets on a regular basis. It's not uncommon, I mean, almost a daily occurrence where civilians are being killed, and it's terrible. Let's go back. We started out, I talked a little bit about the Strait of Hormuz. How is the war in Iran impacting the morale of the army, like let's say in the Third Corps? People focused on that? Or because I want to say thank you as an American, the first European country to come out in support of the U.S. in its mission to deal with the Islamic Republic, which has been an enemy of ours for years, and our allies in the Gulf and in Israel, was Ukraine. Your president came out with a very strong statement of support, which I keep telling American audiences, and I'm just going downtown to D.C. to tell a huge audience, we should never forget that. Ukraine stood up with us when we needed them. While you're fighting your own war against your own evil regime, which is trying to eliminate Ukraine from the map, you spent resources to help us and our Gulf allies. So, but how is it impacting? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is please tell your colleagues, thank you very much for not forgetting us when we needed you. How should Americans understand Ukraine is viewing the war in Iran?
In general, first of all, at the 5th of April, when I came back from US, my chief told me you will go to Saudi Arabia to some Marine Corps of United States for 50 days and you will learn them and you have a team with you, just prepare. And after that, I don't know what happened, but it's on pause now, so we are waiting. But what I want to tell about this, what you are speaking, the war in Hormuz, war here, of course, it's not it's this war are different. But what I feel from my side is that we should not separate them. It's our Western world war against axios of evil guys. Because what I can tell, just not to be the air in my words, to be honest, and on the August of this year, of 2025, we were waiting for Iranian ballistic missiles to go in Ukraine. We were sure that they will be there. Our guys from Air Forces told me and told each other that now we should be ready. It's dozens of them. And they did not get into Ukraine because of what happened of this 12 days war. It's the same. Iranian rockets did not reach Ukrainian land because there are wars there. The same thing here, Russian rocket. Now we saw that Iran were in the Russian Iran, not Shahed 136 or other, but Iran were founded near Strait of Hormuz. So they were sending the drones. But if we were destroying more of them in Ukraine, they were unable to send it there. So I feel that we are together in this war, and for example, PAC-3 rocket, we need them. I can sell all my blood and my liver, everything what you need for at least one PAC-3 missile, because Patriot is the only system in the world that can intercept ballistic rockets. And we don't have an opportunity to have, there are no other systems, just none of them. And PAC-3 rockets, PAC-2 rockets, we need them most from the West, and we are unable to have them from any other country. So, but still, even with this, every rocket, every missile, every PAC-3 that destroyed a rocket in Hormuz, this is a PAC-3 that destroyed a rocket that will not reach Ukraine. So I feel that we are fighting one existential war against that dictatorship and pretty really evil guys. And I totally feel that if we will push our limits to do more that every country can do, because I still feel that not everybody woke up. And sometimes people not even woke up there, didn't even try to. But I hope that our stories like this conversation can help with this. And once we will deal with this, we already saw that Europe can, and the United States and allies can defeat these bad guys a lot of times. We saw it in the history. So we should just need to make the same.
Zhan,
John.
your words, твоя мова подобается мне дуже. What you just said is amazing. And I appreciate you saying, I hadn't heard that before either about, August of last year and the impact of the 12-day war. So thank you for sharing that. And I think our audience, there are a lot of people that are very critical of what's happening now in Iran. But I personally believe that, this is all connected, just what you said. This is all connected. This is an axis of evil. By the way, I argued after 7 October that we should go after the Iranian production facilities that were killing Ukrainians, Israelis, and threatening shipping in the Red Sea. But anyway,
let's talk about one other thing that's amazing that people can't see, which is, Zhan, your mustache. All right, before you were in the Army, did you have a mustache? Because in the US military, aviators are really known for having killer mustaches, and that is a great one. So is this like a new thing for you? Or if we went back 5 years and you're out on the water, you'd have nothing?
I was trying to do such when I was on the fleet, but it was not just a mustache. It was, something like I was just lazy to shave myself. Nobody's there. I shaved my head to be just bald, and some hair still exists on the face. But I first made mustaches itself when I was on war, and my fiance told me, no, no, you will not come home with this. And I said, okay, then I will not come home. And at this moment, it was 6, 7, 8 months in a row when I were on the battlefield, and I came back to Kyiv first time. And she said, shave it. And I said, no. And now when I said that I will shave it, she told me, no, you will not, because you will become a baby again. Now you're like an officer, like a normal guy. I can recognize you, but without I'm now looking at my photo without mustaches. I don't know who that guy was.
Love it. All right. And then, Zhan, that's first of all, a great story. Secondly, when this war is over, what do you want to do? What are you going to do with your days?
I believe that I have, a responsibility on my shoulders that before the war, to be honest, I'm, I know the history of Ukraine. I know the history of the world. I know I'm the patriot. Not the missile guy, but just a patriot of my country. I know how to spill the blood for my country, and I will do this again and again once it be needed. But before, once I were not on ATO on this anti-terrorist operation. I was 17 years old at the beginning of it, and then I go to the sea. It was my last voyage was 11 months. I did not go on the ground for 11 months because of COVID. So all the time I was out of Ukraine. And now I came back, I passed this way, and I feel my personal responsibility and now the right to decide what to do with this country. Because now I know that a lot of my good friends and brothers in arms died for it or wounded or doesn't matter. And I feel responsibility in front of them that this war will not over just on the battlefield. We still have war here in our minds. And I don't feel that this war will be over with the elimination and totally destruction of that our neighbor on the south on the northeast. So I feel that we need to collaborate with the people within army, within the investors who understand it at the same moment as I understand, with the producer of goods, just to create Ukraine as a strong ally for the Western world, as a real, border, as a real frontier of the West in the eastern part of Europe. And it's not only about the military thing. It's not the problem to train the army and tell them what to do. It's about the people to want to be in the army. It's about the honor to be military. It's about the honor to be, I don't know, the head of some department in Ukraine, not the guy who wants to some money or to have a good car. But now we have a lot of greatest people in the world after war that can be involved in building of the sovereign and strong Ukraine, because we received our independence in 1991, but we just received it, and now we are earning it by the people's life, by our time, by everything. And United States totally understand what I mean, because you pass the same way. So even if we are Ukrainians for 1,000 years, we exist as a nation, but almost all the time we were under some Tsar, emperor. Now we are growing as a nation, as a people who know how to decide, who understand why it's not good to be a corruptionist. So, we are like a child nation. We are 26, 27 years old soon. So 35, so it doesn't matter. It's just under 50 years old. We are still childs. I'm 28 and my country is like 6 years older than me. So I know that in 34, 35, I will be not able to decide everything as clear as 50 years old. So we are growing, and I want to be a part of this, growing of our country.
God bless. Well, Zhan, just thank you for everything that you and the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian people are doing to remind us of what we went through to get our independence and to protect the values that we grew up with, the idea of freedom of speech, democracy, the ability to choose what religion you want to pursue, what your faith is, and not have the government stop you. Everything that we find in the US and Ukraine that we don't find in places like Russia, Iran, North Korea. So God bless you for doing what you're doing. You're on the front line of a very, very serious international struggle, battle for the survival of the future of decency. And you're definitely decent people. And it's an honor to know you, and it's an honor to know the rest of the members of your team and all the great Ukrainian friends that we have. And as we always say, Slava Ukraini, and God bless America.
Героям слава.
Geroim Slava.
Thanks for listening and being a part of the RH community. Would you like to receive the same daily intel brief that Glenn and I read? You can get it at restrictedhandling.com. We've curated what we consider to be the most relevant and reputable sources on all things international security, geopolitics, military and intel ops, and economics and sanctions, focused exclusively on Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and the Middle East, to include accompanying podcasts for Russia, China, economics, and spy stories. Just head to restrictedhandling.com, enter your email, and you'll get the daily briefs that Glenn and I both read, and you can leave comments and questions that we can respond to. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe.